Text of Zhang Eiling's Young Chapter 1. As soon as we arrived in this small town, the first thing we saw was a long row of toilets. There is a wooden screen wall in front of them, mounted on a big stone, half covering the two back-to-back pits inside. There are more than a dozen small huts in a row, but there is no one inside. But sometimes a gust of wind blows and smells lightly. The afternoon sun shone faintly on the white thatch on the roof. Passing through this row of toilets is the shop. There is a row of small wide shops, with a large dark mountain standing above it, and two pale green distant mountains appear on the top of the mountain. There is a very narrow gravel road, and there is a low gravel wall blocking the street. There is nothing outside the wall, because there is a steep and dangerous slope outside. A woman walked out of a shop here, holding a big red porcelain basin, crossed the street, and poured a basin of dirty water outside the low wall. For some reason, this move surprised the woman, as if a basin of sewage was leaking out to the end of the world. The end of the world. There is a murderous proprietress sitting in almost every shop. She is very thin, with a long burnt yellow face, and her hair is straight down, hanging down to her shoulders. Decorated with a large peacock blue velvet blanket. I don't know when this kind of dress came up. It looks a bit like the green forest robber played by a martial artist on the stage, making passers-by very uneasy. There is a food shop selling small sesame cakes and black sesame lollipops. In addition to these two items, there were two stacks of white paper packets piled on the counter. It was hard to tell what they were. Someone came and bought a pack, opened it on the spot and ate it. It turned out that there were 5 small sesame cakes wrapped in it. The other pile of paper packets on the counter must be black sesame lollipops, but maybe they are still sesame cakes. On the counter of another store, there was a mountain of tissue paper, but there was a small glass cabinet hung in the air by the door, which displayed toothpaste and tooth powder. The paper bags of tooth powder and the cardboard of hair clips were printed with colorful photos of celebrities. Li Lihua, Zhou Manhua, and Zhou Xuan were all smiling at the empty streets. I don't know why, but it made me feel even more desolate. A few hens were walking on the street, carefully raising one foot and stepping down carefully on the small pebbles embedded in the black mud. A vendor came from the east end, carrying a load, and selling black sesame lollipops. Whether in the countryside or in the city, there is always a candle shop like this that also sells lanterns. Clusters of red candles hang high on the roof beams, like long red fruits, hanging down in clusters. The shop next door has empty walls and only a square table. A little girl is sitting at the table, rolling local cigarettes with a machine. The machine was a small green painted iron box, probably originally an oil barrel, with a handle installed and shaking. The sun lies like a dog blocking the street. The sun gets old here. An old woman came along the way, stopped the hawker and asked him the price of the sesame candy. She looked up at him with bewildered eyes, and suddenly cried out happily, "Hey, isn't this brother Hasheng? How are you two elderly people? How is sister Hasheng? How is your fourth aunt?" The vendor was stunned at first, but then he remembered that she was his fourth aunt's natal relative, as if he had met her twice before. She was short, with a short face and a chin. Her face was tanned to a deep ochre, like dried potato slices, red and wrinkled, curled outwards. She wore an old-fashioned black hat with a pointed mouth, and a mended blue cloth coat. She always had her eyes closed, as if the sun was shining on her face. She always spoke loudly, as if there were large fields in between. "It's rare for you, aunt, to come from this town, right?" The vendor asked her. "Hey, I'm here with my niece today," the old woman shouted. "My niece is getting married tomorrow and will be married to Joe Kun. She will go to the district to register today. The child is pitiful. Both parents are gone. She has only one brother. The sister-in-law has gone to the city to help others. There is only one Keki in the family. The Zhou family has been there since more. They are all going to arrive today. There are too few people here, so I had no choice but to follow." She looked up at him and smiled. "Hey, what a coincidence. How did I meet you?" "We just arrived and were resting at the roadside pavilion over there," I said to them. "I said you guys sit here for a while I go take a look and see them round. Are the family members here? We don't want us to arrive before them, as it would make the bride look too impatient." Is the groom here? Here it comes. Here I see a few people from the Zhou family sitting on the steps of the district office. I have to go and get the bride. It's not good to keep people waiting. You don't have to stand there all the time either. Talking here is delaying business. Is business good? How much did you say a pound of sugar is? The vendor refused to tell her the price this time. He bent down, picked up 2 lollipops, and forced them into her hands. Auntie, take this and eat it. Try it. It's not bad. She grimaced and pushed his hand away. Hey, no. That doesn't make sense. We haven't seen each other in these years. How can we take other people's things when we meet? Take it back and give it to the children. I want to buy some to take back to comfort the children, but I can't ask you to give it away. I can't eat it myself. I'm old. I don't have any teeth. The 2 of them pushed back and forth for a while, and the 2 small black sticks with shiny white flowers melted and stuck to the vendor's hand. Although he was smiling, his face was flushed red and he looked a little impatient. After much effort, the old lady finally reluctantly accepted, said goodbye to him full of grievances, and staggered away. As soon as she turned her back, the smile on the vendor's face suddenly shifted to the old woman's face. He carried the load with a straight face and laughed, but she smiled, limping with her little feet, walked through the row of shops and toilets, left the town, and walked towards the whitewashed pavilion on Guanding Road. Meet someone, she shouted from afar. I can't believe it anymore. Didn't I have a cousin who married into Oxy? This is her husband's nephew. He looks familiar to me. I haven't seen him for so many years, and I don't dare to shout out. Her nephew Jinzhen became a little impatient. Are they here? People from the Zhou family? He asked. He stood under the dome of the road pavilion and waited for her. He was a tall young man with a handsome face, and his skin was the color of dull earth. He had broad shoulders, and every layer of the cotton-padded jacket can be seen. The old cotton-padded jacket is getting thinner and thinner, and has faded to a very light blue. Coming. I saw them coming. Then let's go. Jinzhen turned back to his sister and said. His sister Jinhua seemed not to hear. She was sitting in the pavilion, with her back to him, spitting on her hands and wiping the little girl's hands. The little girl is Jinzhen's daughter, and they brought her here today. The child was making a fuss there because she didn't understand why she was waiting here. She climbed up and down on the bench irritably, then reached out to touch the fan-shaped window, and her hands were black. Soon she would be smearing all the ashes on her aunt's new clothes. The 3 purple-red cloth cotton robes Jinhua wore today will be her wedding dress tomorrow. Jinzhen saw that his sister didn't answer. He stood there with his hands on his hips and looked at her, showing that he had no choice. The old woman panted and walked into the road pavilion. Why don't you go? She shouted. Let's go. Jinzhen said to his sister. Don't be so old-fashioned. Who's stupid? She didn't look back. You have to let me sit down and take a breather. I'm just walking around. Aren't you tired? Let's go. And Tian said, don't be embarrassed. It's too late to be embarrassed at this time. Who is ashamed? Jinhua stood up angrily and led the way to the town. She is 18 years old, but she looks younger than that. On the childish and beautiful face, the lips are slightly open, because one of the teeth in front is slightly shaved. Her hair was shaggy in front, with a row of large and sparse bangs on her forehead, which were kept very long and hung straight into her eyes. They were itchy, so she always sewed her eyes and looked at her from her hair. Looking outside, he seemed to have an anxious look. In this small procession, she walked at the front, and the old woman followed closely behind, as if she was afraid that she would turn around and run away at any time. Jing'an followed them with his daughter in his arms. As they approached the district office, the old woman instinctively took a step closer, held Jinhua's elbow, and helped her walk. Auntie, don't be so futile. She will leave on her own, Jinzhen said. There was a commotion among the people sitting and squatting in front of the district office. They are here. The bride is here, everyone murmured. Several people from the Zhou family came up and greeted Jinzhen with smiles. There was a tall woman in her 50s with a shrewd look on her face. She was the groom's widowed mother. She walked towards Antan grabbed her hands and said, "Hey, it's a long way for you. It's such a shame to take such a trip." The boy who was to be the groom tomorrow stood smiling from a distance. No one looked at the bride, but of course she was being observed. She also smiled slightly and looked round aimlessly as if she was absent-minded. After everyone greeted them, they went in together. After a low-spirited argument, someone was forced to come forward and speak to the cadres. Of course, it is the man who should come forward, and it happens that the groom's mother is the eldest in all relevant respects. But she insisted that this was not something women did and wanted Jin Jen to go. Jin Jen will definitely refuse. Finally, the eldest brother of the groom became the spokesperson. After explaining their intention to the cadres, everyone crowded in front of the table, waiting for the cadres to find out the forms to fill out. The bride and groom were pushed to the front and stood in front of the table with their heads lowered. "What's your name?" the cadre asked the young man. "Jo Deo." "Are you from there?" "People from Jokun." "Who are you going to marry?" He grunted quickly. "Tan Jinhua." "Because she can work." Jinhua also answered the same question. Why did Shi Jianba want to marry him? She followed what others had taught her in advance and murmured the standard answer, "Because he can work." Any other answer will cause more questions, maybe cause trouble. For the bride and groom stamped their fingerprints into the form. Their marriage has been established legally, but the customs follow. And there will be some excitement tomorrow, for the time being. The bride went back with her mother's family. The Zhou family and the Tan family parted ways outside the district office. "Come early tomorrow." "And Tan," the groom's mother said again and again. "You should go back early to rest today. You will be busy tomorrow," and Tan said. Several members of the Tan family walked slowly in the town, watching the excitement along the way. Jinhua quietly held the little girl's hand without saying a word. They walked past the only restaurant in the town, which was a house built with wooden planks. The unpainted wooden planks were bright orange with uneven stripes. The facade is very tall, and the front is completely open. When you look inside, it's dark and noisy. There are all kinds of food hanging down everywhere on the roof, including cabbages, gray hams, and long strips of fresh meat. The milky white crispy tofu skin and the light yellow translucent blistered fish mo are all hanging over the guests' heads. While running the waiter, he also turned on the stove, stir-frying vegetables at the gate, grabbing a handful of salt with exaggerated movements, sprinkling some chopped green onion, then taking out a ball of soup noodles dripping with water from another pot, and throwing it into the frying pan with a sizzling sound. Here, there is an increasing tendency of flying sand and rocks. Outside the door, there was a little girl squatting on the street edge, wearing postman's green trousers, adding firewood to the white clay stove. The lively excitement in the hotel overflowed into the street. Jin Jen's little daughter stood at the door of the hotel, refusing to leave. Jinhua forced her to go, and she started to cry, struggling backwards to free herself, and lay on the ground. Don't cry," said the old woman. "There will be something good to eat tomorrow. Tomorrow your aunt gets married, and we will all go to a wedding banquet. We will eat fish and meat. If you cry again, I won't take you with me tomorrow." But even this couldn't scare her. The child made everyone very embarrassed. The waiter in the restaurant stood in front of the stove and looked at them. The girl who was squatting outside to add firewood also turned her head to look at them. Jin Jen bent down and picked up the child. No matter how she struggled and kicked, he quickly walked out of the market. The child burst into tears. "Don't cry," he said softly. "Your mother is coming back soon, and she has brought good things for you to eat. Do you still remember mother, right?" The child's mother works as a domestic servant in Shanghai. She wrote a letter a few months ago saying that she was quitting her job and coming back to farm. Jin Jen was now assigned a field since the land reform, but the family was still very miserable, as she relied on her to send money back, so she kept putting off quitting her job. Jin Jen said this to his child now, but in fact he estimated that she might not be able to come back to celebrate the new year this year. They named their child Zhao just because they hoped she would recruit a younger brother. But her mother has been away from her hometown in the past few years, so Zhao has been waving in vain. "Don't cry," Azao, Jin Jen murmured. Mom will be back soon and will bring something good for you to eat. This didn't seem to have any effect, but that night he heard her ask Jinhua, Auntie, when will Mom come back? Dad said Mom was coming back soon. He blushed terribly because everyone found him missing his wife there, clearly looking forward to her coming home. It was after dinner, and he was standing at the door smoking a cigarette, with his back to the room. Then he heard his sister's answer, Hey, Mom is coming back soon. You have a mom, so you won't miss me anymore. Her voice sounded smiling, but it seemed a little sad. After he went to bed, he saw that the lamp was still burning in his sister's room. Go to bed early, girl Jinhua, he shouted loudly. You still have to walk 10 miles tomorrow. You haven't slept yet. You have to walk 20 miles back and forth. The lamp was still on. He heard her walking around the room, wondering what she was doing. He was filled with melancholy.
Alright, this part of the story ends here.
Want to know what happened next? Let's listen to the breakdown next time.